Okay, here we're going to, the first hypothesis test we're talking about is for proportions. All right, so when you're reading a word problem or you're given a situation where it involves proportions, 8 out of 10 people or whatever, or a percentage, because 8 out of 10 can be thought of as a percentage, 80%. So that's when we use a proportion test in StatCrunch, which we're going to learn a little bit later. But the hypotheses, and this is for every type of hypothesis test we're going to do the rest of the semester. Here we're learning a hypothesis test for proportions, but then we're going to do these hypothesis tests for averages, hypothesis tests for association between variables, all these different hypotheses tests. But they're all set up the same. You've got the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. So this is H subscript 0, and this is H subscript A. So this is the null hypothesis, and this is the alternative. The null hypothesis is what somebody claims, a company, who knows, whatever. They're making a certain claim. Maybe true or not, we don't know. But that's the claim that's being made, and the alternative, that might be you as a researcher or someone else. They think it's something different than this, yeah? So for proportions, we use this letter P for proportion. We're going to use a different letter later on for average and things, but for proportions we use P. And the proportion might be, I don't know, I'm just picking this out of thin air, 0.60. Maybe some company claims that 60% of the time this or that happens, or who knows what. But if that's the claim, that the proportion is 60%, that's the null hypothesis. Then the alternative is what you think, or the researcher. You might think, no, I think it's more than 60%. If you think it's more, then the alternative is the proportion is greater than 60%. You just think it's more. Well, instead of more, maybe you think it's less. Maybe you think it's 40 or 50 or 53 or 58%, I don't know. But you just think it's less than 60, then the alternative would be that. And sometimes you don't really care if it's less than or equal to. You just don't think it's 60%. It could be more, it could be less. You don't care. It's just not 60. Those are the only 3 different types that you can have. Greater than, less than, or not equal. This is always going to be a proportion is equal to some percentage or decimal. The alternative is, well, do you think it's greater than, less than, or not equal? And it's set up the same every time for proportions. So that's the idea of your null hypothesis and your alternative hypothesis as far as setting that up and the proper notation, the proper way to write them down.